since it was mentioned in the opening statement, the prosecutors were allowed to tell the jury, well, you were told you were going to hear from Mr. Jackson and you didn't. So that is going to be a very difficult instruction for the jury to adhere to.
There's another, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Jeff, I'm sorry. The second thing that I thought that is going to be very difficult for the jury is on the prior acts. The standard that the jury will consider is more likely than not a civil standard, whereas in the case in chief, it's a criminal standard. And it's very, very difficult to separate those two types of instructions. And the final thing is that I don't know anyone who can really articulate the definition of reasonable doubt.
The argument that some have made, Jeffrey, is that those instructions that the judge gave were more to cover his own record, if you will, if there is an appeal. And it was written in sort of legal jargon as opposed to something that the average layperson sitting on that jury could really understand.
Well, I mean, I think as Bob points out, that's more of a systemic failure in California and in the whole country. I mean, the whole subject of legal instructions is a very vexing one because they are not written in ways that normal people exchange thoughts and just talk. I mean, just to emphasize one thing Bob said, you know, the evidence about the five other allegations against him, part of the jury instructions is don't take that evidence as proof that he did it, but take it as showing whether he had a propensity to do it or not. Those are not normal ways of thinking. I mean, you either allow the evidence and let jurors to draw whatever conclusions they want, or you don't allow the evidence. But the instructions are merely confusing. And I think, you know, one of the values of these high-profile cases is they bring out problems in all cases. And one of the problems that jurors often speak about is that jury instructions are simply very hard to understand. And this case certainly showed why that's true.
We see the motorcade now from this aerial shot stuck in a little traffic as it gets closer and closer to Santa Maria and the courthouse in California. We are presumably only moments away from the motorcade getting there. Michael Jackson walking out, being received by Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, and the other criminal defense attorneys representing Michael Jackson. They'll walk into the courthouse, go through the metal detectors as they have during the 14 weeks of the trial, the testimony, the arguments. Our man on the scene from day one has been Ted Rowlands. He's, of course, there right now. Give us a little flavor. Are people showing up by the carloads, Ted?
Oh, yeah. The crowd has gotten much larger over the past hour, as the judge in this case feared would happen. They wanted to get this verdict read as soon as possible. The motorcade right now is only about a block away. They're going to be making a left-hand turn here and then entering the courthouse area. So we're about a minute away, or less. They're going to turn here and then take a right into the courthouse. And they have 4 SUVs. Presumably a good portion of the Jackson family will be with Michael Jackson as he steps out and walks in to hear his fate. They're now just outside the courthouse, and the first van should be making its way in. You can see the Santa Maria police escort, which has been the case, not just today, but throughout the trial, bringing the Jackson motorcade to and from the courthouse.
We see those SUVs making the way, winding up. They're about to stop, and we see Michael Jackson fans. Are there also Michael Jackson opponents who gather out there as well, or just his fans, Ted?
On any given day, there are some vocal Michael Jackson opponents, but they are outnumbered 99% to 1%. As you see the first SUV pull up here and step out the bodyguards, and here comes Michael Jackson now in one of these cars.
You know what we're going to do, Ted? We're going to just listen a little bit, see if our microphones can pick up any of the sound, any of the exchanges. I don't know if that's possible, but we do see that ubiquitous umbrella going up to help protect Michael Jackson from the sun or presumably other aspects as he walks in. Let's just listen briefly if we could get some of the sound from what may be going on. And there he is, Michael Jackson, being escorted inside, surrounded by his father and other family members. His bodyguards are there as well. Michael Jackson walking in, Thomas Mesereau with the white hair, his criminal defense attorney, his lead attorney, as they go inside. Let's listen a little bit longer.
Stay in the middle. The guy's holding the umbrella over him because he's got very sensitive skin.
Ted Rollins, we've seen this happen on so many different occasions during the course of these 14 weeks of this trial. It's a lot different, though, today.
Oh, yeah, and you know, it may not seem that way. The pictures, they seem the same, but I can tell you at the courthouse, it is night and day. The emotion, just watching him get out. There's Jermaine Jackson with his hand on the metal detector there next to Thomas Mesereau shooting through. You see Janet Jackson and LaToya Jackson going through there as well in front of attorney Bob Sanger. The emotion, just the emotion of seeing him pop out and embrace Susan Yu, his mother, who's been here every day and heard some very graphic testimony. You could tell that there is a lot of emotion here, a lot at stake here. A lot of people didn't think Michael Jackson would show up. People thought that maybe he would flee the country, but here he is. He's here to find out which way this jury is going to decide whether or not he is guilty or innocent. There's Janet Jackson walking through the metal detector. There are a certain amount of seats inside the courtroom. Obviously, they've decided who will get which seats, and they are making their way in slowly but surely.
Bob Shapiro, give us a little flavor of what's going through your mind as you watch all of this. And just to remind our viewers, we're only minutes away from the verdict in the Michael Jackson trial.
Unbelievable anxiety and anticipation at this point in time. When you walk into the courtroom, they'll be looking at all the jurors coming out, seeing if anybody looks towards Michael Jackson, if there's any hint of a smile. They will also be sitting there, and something in California that happens, and in most states, is that the judge will ask the foreman if they've reached a verdict. We know they have reached a verdict. The judge will then ask those verdict forms to be turned over to the bailiff, and the bailiff will give them to the judge. The judge will then review those verdict forms, but will not announce the verdict. Again, people will be looking at the judge for his reactions. Then he will hand it to the court clerk, who will then read the verdict as Michael Jackson stands up. After the reading of the verdict, the lawyers will be asked whether or not they want the jury polled as to whether or not this was their verdict. Generally, if there's a conviction, the defense will ask for a polling. And then comes the moment of truth, when the judge makes a decision whether or not to remand Michael Jackson or let him go pending sentencing if, in fact, he is convicted.
And Jeffrey, if in fact he's convicted on some of the so-called lesser charges, he might let him go out on bail.
Absolutely. If he's convicted only of the misdemeanors, for example, I think it is virtually certain that he will be allowed to remain out on bail. You know, one of the folklores of trials is that if the jury comes in and doesn't look at the defendant, that means they are convicting him. If they look at him, that means they are acquitting him. That's actually proven pretty reliable in my experience, and those in the courtroom will let us know whether that plays true to form
Can the jurors, Jeffrey, and I'll let Bob weigh in on this as well, if they walk in and let's say they're sympathetic to Michael Jackson, sort of give him a wink and a nod and sort of a smile and say, you know, relax?
Sure, they absolutely can, and it does happen. And even the issue of polling the jury is important. That's not merely a formality, because if in the course of polling a jury, usually the way it works is the judge says, "Is that your verdict?" And each juror says yes. But if a juror says, "No, I disagree," the judge will send them back in to continue their deliberations. So the polling of the jury usually turns out to be a formality, but it has deep legal significance, and it has happened that it's led to different verdicts.
Bob Shapiro, did you get any hint whatsoever before the verdict in the O.J. Simpson trial from the jurors after they walked in, before the jury verdict was read, what they might decide?
Absolutely not. They came in poker-faced. They knew that every action that they took was going to be reported worldwide. And I think this jury will do the exact same thing. I think they will walk in, they will look straight ahead, they will show no emotion whatsoever, and will act in a real professional way.
And if they do, that would be very much consistent with how they've behaved during this trial. This is a jury that's known that it's been under scrutiny. This jury knows that reporters are sitting there every day. So I think they've gone out of their way, even during very graphic and emotional testimony, not to betray their feelings. And as a result, those of us who watch them have very little idea which way they're leaning.
That's obviously clear right now. We have no idea what the verdict is going to be. And given the nature of the history of California juries, I think it would be ridiculous to even to try to predict what that verdict is going to be. Ted Rowlands, we see all the family members of the Michael Jackson family walking in, the parents, the brothers, the sisters. It would seem to be, at least on the surface, a close-knit, loving family, although we know from all the articles that we've read and all the stories that we've heard, there has been some dysfunctional elements of this family going back many years.
Yeah, but the face that they've put on successfully is that they are one. They have come together to court more times than not. LaToya Jackson went in, one of the first people to go in, and I noticed she was wanded. And that is different. The security today is incredibly high. Each member of the Jackson family, including Michael, was hand-wanded, not just the metal detector. Obviously, a lot of tension, and security is a key aspect of all of this. And right now, there's a very calm sense of quiet outside the courthouse where I could barely hear myself a few minutes ago. Now I can hear a pin drop for a block away. There is nobody talking. Everybody is waiting for this audio feed to kick in. And when that happens, we don't know. The jury obviously has to come in. That'll take a little bit of time, but any minute now, we expect that we'll start to hear that audio feed from inside the courtroom, and from there, we'll be able to see through the audio the picture of what's inside that courtroom. I can only imagine the tension level in there right now.
Ted, are there loudspeakers out there? How are all those hundreds of people going to find out the verdict? Will it just have to be through radios and just the buzz, or will they hear directly themselves?
They will be able to hear some off-air signals from the media, and I think that is why they're literally pressed up against this fence here, which you know very well, Jeffrey, lines the outside of the courthouse. They are all pressed up against it. Whether or not somebody has an amplifier, local TV is covering it, local radio, so I'm sure there are some transistor radios out there or other radios that they'll be able to hear from, so they will hear it. And right now there's a very eerie sense of calm and quiet outside this courthouse. It's hard to articulate, but literally they can hear my voice right now. It is so quiet, people waiting to hear this feed.
Ted, will they give us a sort of a 2-minute warning when the audio feed will begin, or we just have to wait and hope that the system works?
We have to wait and hope it works. In fact, we have Plan B in the works right here. If this audio system doesn't kick in, I'll be getting the verdicts read from a producer here. Peter Ornstein has 2 walkie-talkies up to his ears right now, and that is how we'll get the information out as soon as possible. They're winging it to some extent. As you might imagine, there's a lot of logistics to deal with, so we are just waiting patiently until we, I think, hear this feed. We won't know until it has started.
Is there an accurate number, Ted? How many journalists have gathered in Santa Maria for this Michael Jackson trial? We know not only from the United States and Canada, but from literally around the world, reporters have come to California to cover this trial.
Well, 32 countries are represented. More than 2,000 journalists were credentialed to cover this event. In terms of size, right now, we see the most we've seen in terms of journalists here, and they are literally from all around the world, and they have been here since this jury got it. They've been here sporadically throughout the trial, but the media is here in force, and the world right now is watching and hopefully listening to this verdict that we expect in any minute.
This is a real
Clerk is now in the court. We understand the clerk is in the court, and 2 minutes, we've been told, till the jury comes in. 2 minutes until the jury comes in, and presumably 2 minutes until this audio feed begins from inside the courtroom.
We'll be listening and we'll be watching. Certainly the anticipation building right now. It doesn't get much more exciting. If you've been watching this case, it's going to boil down in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. What happens, and Jeffrey Toobin, as we await this verdict right now, give us a thought.
Well, just one of the, I covered the O.J. Simpson case, and one of the things that I notice is different between the two is, there was greater interest in the United States in the Simpson case, but there really wasn't much international interest in the Simpson case. And what's been so striking about covering Michael Jackson is the degree of worldwide interest. I mean, the CNN camera position there, there have been German television, Japanese television, Mexican television in the next booth over. And, in many respects, Michael Jackson is a greater star overseas than he is in his rather fading way within the United States. So it is no exaggeration to say, the whole world is watching at this point.
We're told the jury is coming in, Ted Rowlands. The members of the jury, 8 women and 4 men. They've been sitting over these past 14 weeks. Within a minute or so, they should be walking in, and shortly thereafter, we presumably will hear the voice of Judge Rodney Melville. Give us some of the preparations for the actual reading of these the verdicts, 10 specific counts against Michael Jackson, some more serious clearly than others, but all of them very serious to begin with. Ted, walk us through this process that's about to happen for viewers who are just tuning in right now at the top of the hour. It's 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast.
Well, the judge will walk into the courtroom, all will rise as is typical, and once court is in session, presumably the judge will say, have you reached a verdict? And the answer from the foreperson number 2, a Hispanic male, will say, yes, we have, Your Honor. At that moment, the verdict forms will be handed over via bailiff to Lorna Fry, and this is the clerk who sits on the left side of the judge. The jury's on the right, and then she will begin with count 1, the conspiracy count, then go through the alleged molestation counts, the lewd acts on a child, the attempted lewd acts, and then the final 4 will be the alcohol counts. Count 2 will be the molestation as alleged by the victim. Whether he's guilty or not guilty on the conspiracy, that will be the big one if he is found guilty on count 2. That will be presumably coming within the next minute. The jury is filing in as we speak, and we are waiting and listening to see if this audio feed kicks in. And if not, we do have someone in a listening room who is hearing it real time and will tell us via the radio what the verdicts are as they come in.
And just to review, Jeffrey Toobin, count 1 is conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion. Once that verdict is reached, as announced on count 1, I presume we will get a pretty good sense which direction this jury is heading.
The big one to listen for is count 2. Count 2 is probably the strongest molestation count, and if he's convicted of that, that changes Michael Jackson's life forever, and that is the count that will keep him in prison for quite a few years.
So we'll be listening to 1 and 2, all of these 10 verdicts, and they will go through, Ted, one by one, all of the verdicts, and then they will poll the jurors after that. Is that how it works?
The attorneys will be given the option, do you want the jurors polled individually? Most likely, whoever loses will say, yes, they do want that to take place. And the jurors will, one by one, get up and say, yes, indeed, that is how I voted in this process. On the last 4 alcohol charges, they also have a lesser to consider. They could find him not guilty of providing alcohol to molest, but guilty of providing alcohol, which is a misdemeanor charge, meaning Jackson would most likely still be out on bail. Okay. Jury is coming in, I'm being told. The jury is now coming in. The judge wanted the alternates to be here as well, 4 men and 4 women that sat through the trial. The alternates are coming in with the 12 panelists, and presumably now within the minute, we should start to hear this audio feed from inside the courtroom.
Jeffrey, these 8 women and 4 men, the jury and the alternates, there was 1 black alternate, but no blacks on the jury. Did anyone make a big issue out of the fact that there were no blacks on the jury?
Well, Jesse Jackson, who's been a sometime spokesman for Michael Jackson, has raised that issue. Interestingly, if 1 juror had left, the African-American alternate, I believe, was alternate number 1, so he would have joined the jury, but no jurors left, so it is a jury without any African Americans. In this area, that is not all that unusual. This is less than 2% African American, this part of Santa Barbara County. This is a city of 70,000 people. Very few African Americans live there. Many Hispanics live there, but not many African Americans. So it is not all that out of the ordinary to have a jury without African Americans.
Is there a heavy police presence, more robust, shall we say, Ted, today than has been the case over these many weeks of this trial?
Wolf, I've just been told the jury is seated, and they are now awaiting for Judge Rodney Melville to enter the courtroom. And at that moment, we should be able to hear this audio feed coming through. The jury, again, is seated, now waiting for the judge to walk into the courtroom to start the proceedings.
All right, we will await, and hopefully that audio signal will work. We'll be able to hear the voice from Judge Rodney Melville give the last bit of instruction as the jury verdict is read to us, to the entire world, all those people who are watching and listening right now. I was asking if the police presence today, Ted, is a lot heavier than it is on a normal day of this trial.
Judge is on the bench. Wolf, the judge is on the bench.
All right.
The judge is on the bench. And we are now waiting for this feed. If it doesn't come through, we have somebody who's monitoring this, and they're telling us via radio the judge is on the bench, and the feed should be coming at any minute. I just heard something in my ear click. I'm assuming that that may be the beginning of this audio feed.
Well, we're letting our viewers know exactly what we know, and hopefully they will get the audio feed exactly as we get it. And we're not getting it yet, so maybe the court has not yet flipped that switch so that we can hear the voice of the judge. Ted, tell us what your producers on the scene are telling you.
I got it. Oh. They are telling us that the judge is on the bench. He's got a radio, and the verdict has now been handed to the judge. The judge will look over the verdict forms and make sure that everything is in order, and then the judge will hand the verdict forms to his left so that they can be read by the court clerk, Lorna Fry, who sits directly to the judge's left. As you're looking, facing him from the courtroom. We have been told that the judge has the verdicts in hand and is looking them over right now, but obviously we are not hearing the audio feed coming from inside the courtroom. However, we will get the verdicts as they are read via two-way radio, and I will pass along the verdicts one by one with each count as we get them over the radio.
All right, we're going to stand by, and hopefully within the next few seconds, we'll begin to hear the voice of the clerk and or the judge as the verdicts in the Michael Jackson trial are read inside this courthouse in Santa Maria, California. These are crowds that have gathered outside the courthouse getting ready. They're anxious to hear as well whether or not Michael Jackson will be convicted or acquitted in this child molestation trial. It's been 14 weeks in the making. The jury has met for 7 days, 32 hours if you're counting, of actual deliberation before reaching the verdict. About 95 or so minutes ago, when we received word from the court that the jury has reached a verdict and would be announced within 60 minutes, but it's actually taken a little bit more than an hour and a half, given the long ride from Neverland to the courthouse. It took a little bit longer than presumably the judge had wanted, but all is well that ends well in this particular regard, not necessarily, Jeffrey Toobin, a big deal that it's 30 minutes later than the judge may have wanted.
This has actually worked fairly smoothly in terms of getting them there, but so far the audio system at least either hasn't been turned on or it's not working.
Any new word you're getting yet on what's going on, Ted?
No, Wolf, I'm looking at Peter Ornstein, our producer. He has both radios pressed up against his ear, waiting for an update. There are 10 separate counts, so there are a lot of forms that the judge will have to look through before he hands them over to the clerk. Presumably, the judge is still checking those out. Again, I just heard an attempt, it sounded like, for the audio feed to kick in. However, nothing at this point. We're still waiting. Word. What's that? Judge is still reading the verdicts, I'm being told. The judge is still reading over the verdict forms. And the courtroom, I'm being told, is absolutely silent, which pretty much mirrors what's happening outside the courthouse. It is absolutely silent out here as everybody waits for word to see which way this jury has decided in terms of Michael Jackson's fate. The judge will, when he's finished looking at these verdicts, hand them to the clerk, and at that point we'll either get the feed or we will pass it along to you via the radio, real time. We have somebody who has visual and has audio from a feed room, which is around the backside of the courthouse, and that individual will pass it along to us over the radio, if need be.
How extraordinary, Jeffrey, is the way this Judge Rodney Melville, has orchestrated the release of the information and the verdict. How unusual is this, what we're seeing? Obviously, this is a high-profile celebrity case, but still.
I've never seen a judge allow a partial audio broadcast. I mean, this is without precedent. It was designed to avoid the confusion that we had in the Martha Stewart case, where there was no audio feed, and people came running out of the courtroom with signals that some were right, some were wrong. The idea is give everyone the information at the same time, avoid that confusion, and we'll see if it works.
Bob Shapiro, if you're still awaiting, still can hear us, Bob Shapiro, the criminal defense attorney who represented O.J. Simpson in his trial 10 years ago, how extraordinary is this procedure that Judge Melville has worked out?
It's totally unique, and as Jeff pointed out, in these high-profile cases, one thing you always hear, and that is from the prosecutors, that the cases aren't going to be tried any differently, and the judges would like you to have that same impression. Nothing could be further from the truth. These cases have their own unique attributes. Everybody views them differently, and I think the judge has made a good decision here in releasing the verdicts. I actually would have preferred to have those verdicts read with a camera in the courtroom on the clerk.
We can assume, Bob Shapiro, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no hung jury. They've reached a verdict on all 10 counts.
It's not we can assume, we know. They have announced that they have reached a verdict. They buzz the judge, and they have one buzz if they have a verdict, two buzzes if they have a question. So clearly, if the reports have been accurate, there was one buzz and a verdict will be read on each and every count.
One thing that was very unusual about this jury deliberation is that the questions that the jury had, and there were some questions, and the readbacks that took place were not released to the public. And I think, frankly, that's a very disturbing development for those of us who believe in public trials. And this is the first trial I have ever heard of where jury questions were not released to the public.
Would they be released after the verdicts are announced?
Perhaps, presumably, but since they've never not been released before, I don't know what procedure the judge plans to use. But, I mean, again, I think it's an example of how these high-profile trials develop their own codes, their own laws, and judges have been moving more and more towards restricting them.
You've tried a lot of cases in California. How extraordinary is this, the fact that we were not told what the questions were, Bob Shapiro?
Yeah, it's not, I don't find it that extraordinary at all. Generally, what happens is when the jury has a question, the judge calls both lawyers in, and they read the question. And it may be, can you give us a better definition? Usually the response is, follow the instructions that you've already been given. It's a time for people to try to be fair, but it is also a give and take session. And so those kinds of things generally are off the record. I don't see any problem with it. If there is a readback, they could announce what was read back, and I agree with Jeff on that issue.
And Bob Shapiro, we're told by Ted Rowlands and our producers on the ground who are inside that courtroom listening to what's going on as we await the audio from the court clerk and from the judge on the verdict, 10 counts involving this child molestation trial against Michael Jackson. As the judge is now going through the paperwork, reading the verdict, studying them, does he have any discretion if, let's say he has a question and he's confused, could he tell the jury, you know what, I want to take a break and let's review something, or must he go forward now, Bob Shapiro, and have the verdicts announced?
Wolf, that's a very, very good question. If there are inaccuracies, or if there are clear mistakes in the verdict form, or if there are special allegations that the jurors have to render a decision on and they haven't filled out the verdict forms properly, he will instruct the jury to go back and do them properly. However, he cannot change anything that this jury has done at this point in time. If there is a conviction, he could do it later.
Another unusual aspect of this deliberation is that the judge has not released the exact verdict form that the jury is filling out. Again, that's usually the case in high-profile trials where there's interest in a verdict form. For reasons that are, frankly, inexplicable to me, this judge has not released the precise form that the jury will be checking the boxes in, so we don't know precisely how the verdict will be announced.
Bob Shapiro, here we go. Here's the audio. Let's listen.
Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Santa Barbara, Santa Maria Division. The people of the State of California, plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson, defendant. Case number 1133603. Count 1, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 2, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 2 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 3, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 3 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 4, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 4 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 5, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 5 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 6, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 9, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 10 verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80.
That completes the reading of the verdict, and now we're going to go off the air.
And there it is, all 10 counts, not guilty on all 10 counts. Michael Jackson will be walking out of this courtroom a free man, not guilty on the more serious charges, the lesser charges, administering alcohol, a misdemeanor, a slam dunk against the prosecution. Jeffrey Toobin, I think it's fair to say a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised.
A lot of people are going to be surprised, and you don't need a law degree to understand this verdict. It is an absolute and complete victory for Michael Jackson, utter humiliation and defeat for Thomas Sneddon, the district attorney, who has been pursuing Michael Jackson for more than a decade, who brought a case that was not, it was not one that this jury bought at all. And this one's over.
We said before the verdict that California juries are unpredictable, Bob Shapiro. In this particular case, a lot of people thought Michael Jackson would be convicted at least on the misdemeanors. A lot of people thought he'd be convicted on the more serious felony counts, the sexual assault, if you will. Give us your immediate reaction.
Well, first, the jury did not come up with a